Our credit outlooks offer in-depth insight into credit in 2019 and beyond. I'm Kevin Degnan, Global Head of Financial Institutions Ratings, and today I'll be speaking with a group of senior analysts who cover the world of aviation from a variety of perspectives, including airlines, manufacturers, lessors, EETCs, and aircraft ABS. Joining me are Craig Fraser, Head of U.S. Industrials and Transportation, Nathan Flanders, Global Head of Non-Bank Financial Institutions, and Hilton Hurd, who leads our aircraft ABS rating effort. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Craig, let's start with you. In terms of aviation market dynamics, what are you seeing currently, and how is that influencing our outlook for 2019?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. The overall market dynamics are generally very positive, but we increasingly see reasons to be cautious. Our outlook for 2019 for the global airline industry is stable. Our outlook for the aerospace manufacturers is also stable, but that the manufacturer outlook is actually revised down from positive in 2018. If you look at some of the key aviation indicators, you get a better idea of why we have this outlook and increasing caution. First of all, Fitch's forecast for aircraft deliveries for 2019 is up 8.5%, and we think it will decelerate in 2020 down to 4%. Looking at this from another perspective, that is also the level of increased financing need or capital expenditures that the global airline industry and aircraft leasing sector will see. We think the biggest risk to this continues to be the global aerospace supply chain, which is already pretty stressed and caused some delays in 2018. Aircraft orders continue to be pretty strong, better than we expected, but they are down in 2018, and we expect they'll be down in 2019 as well. This isn't a huge concern because the aircraft order backlog is at record levels, although it did come down this year. Airline traffic is probably the most important variable in the global industry. IATA, which is the main industry body in the industry, estimates traffic will be up 6.5% in 2018. We think it starts trending down from here, mainly for economic reasons. Airline profits are still near record levels, but we would note that there's a significant skew regionally, mainly towards North America. Also, despite 9 years of positive performance in the industry still has operating margins of less than 7%. All this feeds into airline credit quality. As I mentioned, we have a stable outlook for the industry, but I would note that most of the airlines that we rate are the larger airlines in the world. There's a very substantial number of smaller, financially weaker airlines in the industry. These are already coming under pressure in 2018 because of higher fuel prices, fuel volatility, and the strong US dollar, and we think that's a watch item for 2019.
Thanks, Craig. That's a great intro to the subject. Ned, some of the same issues that Craig mentioned affect aircraft lessors as well, but are there any other specific issues related to leasing that are influencing our outlook for 2019?
Yeah, I would say the financing risk inherent in the aircraft leasing business model is probably the most notable dynamic, in addition to what Craig mentioned, which I certainly agree with. It's a capital-intensive business. They need continual access to financing. So right now the markets are supportive, but if there's market stress, that could pressure their availability of financing. We also would note their aircraft lessors have booked significant gains on the sale of used aircraft. We think demand for used aircraft is probably near the peak. That's been a tailwind for lessors in terms of realizing gains and managing the age of their fleets, but we think that could ebb over time, and lessors may have a profitability hit and may see their fleet age migrate a little bit. Third, the competition in the environment is very intense at the moment. That's pressuring lease yields for many lessors, and we think there may be some reaching on credit or terms, so that definitely warrants monitoring in 2019.
Thanks, Ned. Hilton, how could some of the airline and aircraft issues that Craig mentioned and the lessor issues that Ned mentioned impact our outlook for aircraft ABS in 2019?
Kevin, ABS faces challenges from severe late cycle behavior permeating the leasing sector. Fitch expects aircraft ABS asset performance to be weak in 2019, consistent with Craig's comments around pressures on deteriorating airline lessee credits in ABS pools, mostly from the smaller airlines, and elevated aircraft values, as Ned pointed out, which can only come down. Despite this, our rating outlook is stable as outstanding ABS cash flows are forecast to be within our expectations next year. The proliferation of new, smaller, less capitalized lessors entering the space issuing ABS poses risks to the sector and is a key focus for 2019. Fitch is taking a leading credit position, being selective on which lessor ABS platforms to rate, with numerous corporate credit factors warranting careful consideration for lessors to execute investment-grade ABS ratings. Lastly, industry constituents believe such behavior from these new, smaller lessors tapping ABS as a funding source would not survive a downturn. Of the lessor ABS platforms Fitch rates, all have been in business for over 5 years and have well-established businesses with solid management teams. Around 50% of them carry investment-grade corporate ratings issued by Ned's FI team, whom we work closely with, assessing whether to rate a lessor ABS platform. As a result, Fitch has rated only 35% of all the ABS transactions issued since 2013, and only 1 of 8 first-time lessors tapping ABS as a funding source.
Very good. Thanks very much. Craig, the aircraft airline sector is by its nature cyclical and prone to exogenous shocks. Can you talk a little bit more about what factors are leading to us being increasingly concerned about the outlook for 2019?
Yeah, sure. There's really 4 general reasons. There are a lot of reasons, but just focusing on 4. The first one is the industry is economically sensitive, and we think that the risks are to the downside from here, whether it's from slower GDP growth globally or trade disputes or other factors. We think that the risks are to the downside. Another risk that we see is that the overall positive numbers in aggregate that we're seeing from the industry, we feel mask some risks related to the significant imbalances and concentrations in the industry. I alluded to one already. That's the big profit skew towards North America, which accounts for about 50% of the industry's profits, but only generates less than 1/4 of airline traffic, so very skewed there. We also think there's a significant disparity in credit quality among airlines according to size. As I mentioned, we rate the bigger airlines. There are approximately 350 airlines in the world, illustrating the concentration. The top 50 airlines account for approximately 70 to 75% of traffic, meaning that there are literally hundreds of other airlines, smaller, financially weaker. We've seen them come under pressure already. We've seen a noticeable spike in bankruptcies and insolvencies in the last 3 or 4 months, and we think that continues through 2019. Another general concern we have is that we fear that the longest aviation upturn on record, which we are in right now, has bred complacency throughout the industry, and we're hearing that in comments from industry CEOs about the industry not being cyclical any longer. We're seeing that in production rate decisions, potentially taking rates higher even though the supply chain is still stressed. And we're seeing that in cash deployment decisions by airlines, which are buying back a lot of their stock. All of this is in the context of the high structural risk profile of the industry. The airline industry has a very volatile mix of high operating leverage and high financial leverage. So when the inevitable industry downturn comes, the industry's financial performance could deteriorate rapidly.
Thanks, Craig. And Ned, so moving back then to aircraft lessors, how are they better or worse positioned today than they were in the financial stress of 2008, 2009?
I would say they're generally better positioned. They've taken advantage of accommodative funding markets to extend the term of their funding and increase the unsecured component of their funding. They've used the benign asset environment to retain capital and deleverage. And it's certainly for the scale players, they've continued to professionalize their risk management frameworks and their repossession frameworks, so we think they're better positioned to respond to stress when it comes. That said, the lessors have become a larger proportion of the market, so all else equal, they'll have a greater proportionate impact felt if and when there is stress. I mentioned the competitors that are in the space, many of whom have not been proven through a credit cycle, so their lasting power or their commitment to the space is not yet fully known. And I would mention that export credit agency financing is not as available now as it was in the last crisis, and that certainly was an important source of financing when the traditional markets dried up.
In Hilton, when we look at aircraft ABS, what are you seeing now in terms of the profile of the deals compared to the last cycle in terms of the airlines, the aircraft, and the lessee credit?
Yeah, Fitch rated pools comprise mostly narrow-body Boeing 737 and A320 family aircraft, with mostly unrated weak airline lessee credits and a large presence of developing emerging market lessees, especially in APAC. Focusing on asset values, aircraft value impairments have been limited to date, but remain a risk for ABS, as mentioned earlier. The challenging airline environment is a credit risk for ABS. Our weaker performance outlook is mainly due to challenges facing airlines despite solid industry fundamentals. Aircraft demand and travel fundamentals are robust, but the sector has peaked and airline profits have come down, as Craig has pointed to. We've seen airline bankruptcies in securitized ABS pools despite benign conditions, driven by heightened competition and ineffective business models. To date, we've seen little impact on ABS, and most aircraft have been repossessed and placed easily with new lessees. But this can change were there to be a downturn, particularly for those new, smaller lessors.
Good, thanks. All right, in our last couple of minutes, I'd like to ask each of you a couple of questions and ask you to give us very quick answers. So, Craig, starting with you, a year from now, do you think there's going to be more, less, or the same number of issuers in your sector?
More issuers as more airlines use the debt capital markets to fund their capital expenditures, but fewer airlines as a result of bankruptcies and related consolidation.
Okay. Same question to you, Ned. More, less, or the same issuers in your sector?
I'd be surprised if it's higher. I think if it's a benign environment, it'll be about the same number of issuers. If we have stress, we'll see some consolidation or some more recent players exit.
Okay, and Hilton, more or less of the same aircraft ABS issuers?
Yeah, for ABS, flat to down. I think the challenging conditions next year that Ned and Craig pointed to will result in fewer ABS issuers, and that might mostly be pressure on the smaller names to execute ABS next year.
Okay. And lastly, where are we in the aviation cycle from your perspective for your sectors?
Late cycle and increasingly exposed to negative catalysts.
Ned?
Aircraft lessors fundamentals look strong, but you can't separate it from the operating environment. So I'd agree with Craig. We're approaching the end of the runway on the cycle.
And Hilton?
Late cycle as well for ABS. We are definitely past the peak cruising altitude.
Gentlemen, thanks very much for your perspective. For more aviation-related commentary and to see our 2019 outlooks, please visit our website. Thanks for watching.